Welcome back, everybody. We are diving deep today into how we can elevate our mindsets and live more fulfilling lives.
Interesting topic.
Yeah, and to help us out with this, we have some great insights from Heng.
Sounds good.
Yeah, so we are going to be taking a look at an excerpt from his talk. 90% of your thoughts are unnecessary. Let them pass.
Mm.
And you know how sometimes you get like really upset over spilled coffee?
Yeah, I've been there.
That might be a sign that you're not as elevated as you could be.
Okay, interesting.
We are also going to unpack this idea of the two arrows.
Okay.
It's pretty intriguing, and if you can understand it, it can really help you deal with tough situations a lot better.
I'm interested to learn more about this.
So Heng, this is his main message.
Okay.
90% of our thoughts are totally unnecessary.
Wow.
And not only that, but they are actually like at the root of a lot of our suffering.
That's a big claim. 90%?
I know, right? It's bold. That's
Yeah.
a big percentage. Does that resonate with you at all? Have you ever thought about like how much time you spend, dwelling on stuff that doesn't really matter?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I think we've all been there.
Yeah.
It's so easy to get caught up in those thoughts that don't actually serve us.
Right. And he really emphasizes this idea of awareness.
Okay.
It's not about like stopping thoughts altogether.
Right.
It's more about like being able to step back and observe those thoughts without getting like totally swept away by them.
Okay, yeah.
He gives this really great analogy in the talk.
Oh, I like analogies.
He points out that like he is aware of thoughts that are popping up in his head as he's speaking to us,
Right.
but he doesn't engage with them because they're not relevant to what he's talking about.
He's able to just let them pass by.
Exactly.
Interesting.
And it's that detachment that lets him stay present.
That makes sense.
So instead of being like consumed by every random thought that comes into our heads,
Yeah.
we can choose which ones deserve our attention and which ones we can just kind of let go.
So we have more control than we think.
Right. And he contrasts this with being mind-based.
Mind-based.
Yeah, where we like react to every thought as if it was like a command. And it's like we're on autopilot,
Yeah.
just kind of blindly reacting to whatever pops into our heads.
I think I do that more than I realize.
So the question is, how do we break free from that mind-based state and become more present?
Yeah, I'd love to know.
He talks about these two key states of mind,
Okay.
being present and intentional, and that's opposed to being mind-based.
Got it.
So when we're mind-based, we're constantly reacting emotionally and impulsively to our thoughts,
Yeah.
and it's exhausting.
It can be really draining.
Yeah, but when we can cultivate that awareness and presence, we become the masters of our minds instead of being like ruled by them.
I like that idea of being the master of your mind instead of the other way around.
It's interesting how he contrasts those two things,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Can you give us an example of what it looks like to go from mind-based to being more intentional and present?
Sure. Let's say you're stuck in traffic.
Oh, okay. I hate that.
Yeah, me too. So a mind-based reaction might be, frustration, anger, or impatience.
Yeah, definitely.
Right? You get caught up in those thoughts and feelings, and it just makes the whole situation even more stressful.
Ugh.
A more intentional approach would be to, first acknowledge the situation,
Okay.
maybe even just accept it,
Mm.
and then decide how you want to spend that time.
Okay.
You could listen to a podcast, enjoy some music, or just practice, being present with your breath.
So it's not about changing the situation. It's
Yeah.
about changing how you experience the situation.
Exactly. The situation hasn't changed, but your experience of it has shifted.
So it's about shifting our perspective and choosing how we respond to things
Yeah.
instead of just automatically reacting.
Right. You're taking back control.
And this brings us to another big idea, this idea of alignment. Yeah. Heng says our thoughts, words, and actions should be in harmony.
I see.
I have definitely experienced those times when those things were out of sync.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Like, I remember this one time I agreed to help a friend with a project, even though I was already overwhelmed. And I told myself I was being helpful. But,
Right.
like, deep down, I was kind of resenting it.
You weren't fully on board.
Yeah. And it just created this, like, internal conflict.
That's a great example of misalignment.
Yeah.
You were saying yes, but your true feelings and probably your actions didn't actually match up.
They did not.
And that disconnect, it leads to stress and unhappiness.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And aligning my actions with my true feelings is something I've been working on.
It's an ongoing process.
It is. But how does this idea of alignment tie into elevating our mindset?
Right.
It sounds like a lot of work.
Well, you see, for Heng Yi, elevating our internal state means becoming less reactive and more intentional.
Okay.
It's about moving away from being controlled by our thoughts and emotions and choosing a more mindful way of being.
So we're not denying difficult emotions.
No, not at
We're
all.
just recognizing them as opportunities for growth.
Exactly. They can teach us a lot about ourselves.
That makes a lot of sense. Instead of seeing challenges as setbacks, we can choose to see them as chances to learn and evolve.
Exactly. They're not roadblocks, they're stepping stones.
I like that.
Yeah.
And he uses this really powerful example
Yo.
to illustrate this point. Imagine somebody who consistently gets angry when their cup is taken away.
Okay.
Seems kind of simple, but it highlights how we often react habitually
Yeah.
to situations without stopping to think about why.
We're just on autopilot.
Yeah, it's like our default is to get upset or frustrated,
Hmm.
but those reactions might be masking a deeper issue.
That's a good point. We
Yeah.
might need to dig a little deeper.
Right, and these recurring challenges,
Mhm.
whether it's, jealousy, anger, frustration, or whatever,
Yeah.
they're opportunities to really look at our internal state
Hmm.
and work towards greater peace.
So we're not just looking for a temporary mood boost.
Yeah.
We're talking about a fundamental shift in how we approach all of life's ups and downs.
Exactly.
It's about cultivating that inner peace that isn't easily shaken by all the external stuff.
It's a journey,
It is a journey, not a quick fix.
not a quick fix.
It takes time and effort.
So we can work towards this more elevated state by really looking at those challenges and trying to understand our reactions and becoming more intentional.
Right.
But how do we actually create more peace in our lives?
Well, Heng talks about the importance of our environment. He mentions, monasteries and ashrams as these places that are kind of intentionally designed
Okay.
to help people cultivate a more peaceful and present state of mind.
That's interesting. But most of us don't live in a monastery.
Right.
So can we create those kinds of environments in our everyday lives?
Absolutely. We can create these little mini monasteries.
Mini monasteries. I love that.
Yeah.
What would that look like?
Well, it's about, intentionally designing your surroundings and your schedule
Try?
in a way that supports your well-being.
Mm-hmm.
It could be, as simple as setting aside like a quiet little corner in your home
Right.
for meditation or reflection.
Okay.
Or maybe it's committing to like a daily walk in nature.
Yeah.
Or just being mindful of, the media you consume or the people you spend time with.
Okay.
Surrounding yourself with things that uplift and inspire you.
Yeah.
That can really have a profound impact on your mental state.
It's about making those conscious choices that nurture that inner peace.
Exactly.
We can create those little pockets of serenity in
Mm.
our daily lives.
Right. And it's not about becoming a hermit or withdrawing from the world.
Okay.
It's more about just being intentional with your time and energy.
Yeah.
So you can show up as your best self in all areas of your life.
I'm also really curious about this concept of the two arrows.
Ah, yes, the two S.
Can you unpack that a little more for us?
Sure. The two arrows analogy is a really powerful way to understand how we create unnecessary suffering for ourselves.
Oh, okay.
So the first arrow represents those inevitable challenges that we all face in life.
Like what kind of challenges?
Well, things we don't have a lot of control over. Things like illness, loss, disappointment, setbacks.
Right. Wow, those are part of life.
Exactly. Think of it like going to the dentist.
Ah,
It's not always pleasant,
okay.
but it's necessary sometimes.
I can relate to that. Nobody enjoys a root canal, but, it's part of life.
Right, exactly. Now, the second arrow
Okay.
represents our reaction to these challenges.
Mm.
It's the suffering that we create by dwelling on them, overthinking, blaming ourselves or others.
So we resist what is happening.
Yeah.
And that resistance causes the pain to linger.
Exactly. It's not the event itself that causes the most suffering.
Mm.
It's our response to it.
Okay, I see that. Now, Heng suggests that the second arrow is optional.
Yes.
Okay, so we can't always control what happens to us,
Right.
but we can choose how we respond.
Exactly. We have more power than we think.
Can you give us an example of the two arrows in action?
Okay, let's say you lose a loved one.
Ah, that's hard.
It is a really difficult experience.
Yeah.
That loss is the first arrow.
Okay.
It's incredibly painful, and there's no way around that grief.
Right.
But then the second arrow might come in the form of guilt, regret, or anger.
Mm-hmm.
We might start blaming ourselves or others,
Yeah.
and those thoughts and feelings just prolong the suffering.
It's not about denying the pain of the first arrow,
Right.
but becoming aware of those second arrows that we inflict on ourselves.
Exactly. And awareness is the key to letting go of that second arrow.
So how do we become more aware of these second arrows?
Well, it starts with paying attention to your thoughts and feelings.
Okay.
Notice those moments when you're resisting what's happening,
Hmm.
when you're kind of adding fuel to the fire of your suffering,
Yeah.
with all those negative thoughts and stories.
Yeah.
And it's not about suppressing those thoughts.
Okay.
It's about observing them with a sense of detachment
Okay.
and then choosing a more skillful response.
So the two arrows concept is all about taking responsibility for our experience.
Yes, it's empowering because it reminds us that we actually have more control over our inner world
Okay.
than we often realize.
This connects back to that point about true peace coming from within.
Yes.
We often look for happiness in, external things,
Mm-hmm.
achievements, possessions, relationships.
Right, all that stuff.
But lasting peace can only be found within ourselves.
That's a crucial point. He emphasizes that paradise is not a destination.
Okay.
It's a state of being.
So how do we cultivate that inner paradise? What does that look like?
He points to these two fundamental aspects of greatness,
Okay.
loving and appreciating life,
Okay.
and sharing that love and appreciation with others.
Those sound like pretty big aspirations.
They are, but they're not out of reach.
Yeah.
It starts with small, everyday choices.
Okay.
It's about shifting our attention from what's wrong to what's right. Instead of dwelling on what we lack, we can choose to focus on what we have.
So we're talking about practicing gratitude.
Exactly. It could be as simple as appreciating a beautiful sunset, a delicious meal, a kind gesture from a stranger.
Those little things.
Yeah. And when we make a conscious effort to notice and appreciate the good things in our lives,
Mm-hmm.
it shifts our perspective
Yeah.
and opens us up to more joy.
And then the second part is about sharing that joy with others.
Yes.
Yeah.
When we experience that genuine happiness and fulfillment,
Mm-hmm.
it naturally radiates outwards.
Okay.
We become more compassionate, more understanding, more willing to support others.
It's like this ripple effect of positivity.
Precisely. And these acts of sharing don't have to be grand gestures.
Okay.
It can be as simple as offering a genuine smile, listening attentively to a friend, or lending a helping hand when someone is struggling.
So we create a more harmonious and fulfilling world.
Yeah, for everyone.
So it's not just about cultivating inner peace for ourselves.
Right.
It's about contributing to the well-being of others. It sounds like everything is connected.
It is. And that brings us to another interesting idea that he touches on, this idea that we never meet anyone by coincidence.
Never meet anyone by coincidence.
He believes that every encounter we have, every relationship we form,
Yeah.
is a potential lesson waiting to be uncovered.
So it's not just random chance that brings people into our lives.
He suggests there's a deeper purpose or meaning behind every connection.
Mm.
It invites us to look beyond the surface
Right.
and consider what we might be learning from the people we encounter, even those interactions that seem fleeting or insignificant.
That's a powerful reminder to be present and attentive in all our interactions.
Yeah.
We might miss those valuable lessons if we're not paying attention.
Exactly. It challenges us to approach relationships with curiosity and openness,
Okay.
recognizing that every person we meet, even those who challenge us,
Right.
has something to teach us.
So we can learn and grow from every encounter.
Yeah.
Whether it's positive or negative.
Right? It's about shifting our mindset from judgment and separation to one of curiosity and connection.
That's pretty amazing to think about all those connections and lessons, just woven into our lives.
It is fascinating.
Speaking of connections,
Yeah.
Heng also talked about this idea of separation
Mm.
and how that actually contributes to suffering.
Oh, interesting.
What did you make of that?
Well, he was talking about how our minds tend to create these artificial divisions,
Okay.
like past versus present future versus now us versus them.
Right.
All this categorizing and separating.
Yeah.
And it leads to this sense of disconnection
Right.
and ultimately more suffering.
It's almost like we build these walls in our minds
Yeah,
that separate us from others and even from the present moment.
exactly.
Yeah.
We get trapped in our own little bubbles.
Yeah. And he suggests that like a path to liberation lies in recognizing that interconnectedness of everything.
Mm.
So instead of focusing on what separates us,
Yeah.
we should try to see those common threads that bind us all together.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
about shifting our perspective
Okay.
from, me versus you
Right.
to we.
We.
Yeah. And that shift in mindset, it allows us to experience greater compassion, empathy,
Mm-hmm.
and connection with the world around us.
It's a powerful thought. And it seems to tie into like everything else we've been talking about.
Right.
The awareness, the intentionality, choosing how we respond to those challenges.
It all comes back to that, cultivating that mindset of unity and connection.
When we can see our shared humanity,
Mm-hmm.
it becomes a little easier to let go of that judgment and embrace compassion.
Absolutely.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground today,
We have.
exploring the wisdom of Shi Heng Yi
Mm-hmm.
and how we can create more peace and fulfillment in our lives.
It's been a great discussion.
As we wrap up, what are some key takeaways you hope our listeners will remember?
Well, I think the most important takeaway is the power of awareness.
Okay.
When we become more aware of our thoughts, our reactions, the stories we tell ourselves, we gain the freedom to choose a different path.
Mm-hmm.
We can step out of that autopilot mode
Okay.
and start living with more intention and purpose.
And don't forget those mini monasteries.
Oh, yeah, those are important.
We can all create those spaces and routines, that really support our well-being.
For sure.
Whether it's, a quiet corner for meditation, a walk in nature,
Yeah.
or just being mindful of who and what we surround ourselves with.
Right. Those little havens, they can make a big difference.
They really can. And remember,
Yeah.
the journey to a more fulfilling life starts with a single step.
One step at a time.
That's right. It's about being willing to examine our habits,
Mm-hmm.
challenge our assumptions,
Yeah.
and make those conscious choices
Right.
that align with our values.
It's a lifelong practice.
It is.
But even those small changes can have a ripple effect.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the world of Shi Heng Yi.
It's been a pleasure being here.
Before we go, let's revisit that thought-provoking question about those meaningful encounters.
Right.
Remember, Shi Heng Yi suggests that we never meet anyone by coincidence.
Powerful idea.
It is. So we'll leave you with this. Who in your life might be there for a reason, offering you a lesson you haven't quite recognized yet?
That's a good one.
Take some time to reflect on that and see what insights emerge.
Great advice.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep.